I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of several books, no other than Mr. Robert Boog.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yes, welcome to Book 101, Mr. Robert, and can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Robert Boog. I'm a real estate broker and I live in Valencia, California, which is about 20 minutes north of Hollywood, California.
Interesting. So, Mr. Robert, what age did you realize that you are good in writing?
I got tricked by my fourth grade principal. What happened was I wrote a story in class and then the teacher wrote on my paper, please see me after class is over today. And after a class was over, she took me to the principal's office and they called my mother in. And the teacher didn't believe that I'd written the the story that I'd written.
Really?
Yeah, so the principal said, "We have an easy way of you know figuring this out. We'll just have Robert write another story tomorrow." So I had to go to the principal's office the next day and I wrote another story. And then a funny thing happened. I ended up going to see the principal again, the third time, and I'd
Oh
never
my
gotten,
goodness.
yeah, I never had been in trouble before in my whole life. And she told me that I didn't need to go to fourth grade English anymore. That she sent me to a sixth grade class. And then after I was in the sixth grade class for about a week, and then she just sent me to the library every day. So I ended up not having to go. She just said, "You like to read, it seems like," and I said, "Yeah." And so that was it. I never took English in sixth grade.
Oh, that's interesting and amazing. Mr. Roberts, who are your favorite authors that influence you?
Mm, I would say, of course, Shakespeare, and but I'm into like reading self-help stuff. I read all kinds of stuff. So to be honest, like Dale Carnegie, and I call myself a perennial student because I'm always looking to learn things. So my I I just don't have one favorite, but Stephen King is one, of course, and I don't know, Robert Cialdini. I really like him.
If they describe their writing, what is it or what are they?
Well, what I like about Cialdini, I'm a student of psychology, and so he wrote a great book called Influence, and it talks about how how to influence or how to help sell to someone. And that is also with Tom Hopkins, another favorite of mine. But because I'm in the world of real estate, I graduated from UCLA and went right into selling real estate. So I've sold real estate for ever since I left UCLA, which is a very challenging job because you don't receive a regular paycheck. You're paid on commission. But I figured out that if you know how to help people get the feelings that they want from what they're buying, then you're just more successful at it.
That be amazing. You told us that you love Shakespeare. If you compare Shakespeare to his rival Christopher Marlowe, what's the big difference?
Okay, so I I come from a totally different um, thought on this, and it is that I believe that Shakespeare and Marlowe were the same person, and they were not. It was not William Shakespeare; it was another man. So
Okay,
yeah,
it's a
so
it's a pen name.
correct. Yeah, they both and actually okay. So what we've learned in high school about Shakespeare, I think, was only like a half truth. And
Okay.
so it kind of, I mean, it gets into the world of the Elizabethans back in the 1600s. They would use, I mean, these famous people didn't want to argue in public, so they would use what we call an allonym, or someone today we might call him a Facebook sock puppet, or a fake Twitter handle or something. You would make
Yes.
up someone, but back then
Yes.
it had to be a real life, breathing person, and that person would allow you to, you would pay them, and they would put their name on it, and that's what I think Shakespeare did. I mean, Shakespeare was the front for a guy named Edward de Vere,
Oh.
and he was the 17th Earl of Oxford. So a lot of people, or a lot of times when I'm talking, I'll say Oxford or Edward de Vere, meaning the same person. It's just kind of an abbreviation.
Or why did you chosen Shakespeare to be one of your novel? Is it novel?
It's more of like a non-fiction historical mystery, if that makes any sense. So if you like to watch the TV show Dateline or 48 Hours, or TV shows where there's a real life mystery, the question is, with Shakespeare, who wrote Shakespeare first of all, or who was behind him? And just figuring out things like that is the fun of it. Like I was saying, like I believe that Shakespeare and Marlowe were the same, uh, you know,
Yeah.
thing, kind
Yeah.
of thing. So it's kind of like a whole who done it thing, that, or a cold case file that is over 400 years old. So it's kind of interesting when you really get into it. Okay, so the one that I'd like to talk about is um, where North by Shakespeare goes south. And it's kind of funny, but in 2021, there was a book called North by Shakespeare. And those researchers, what they did is they took software, a software program that is used to identify plagiarism in college students. And they put Shakespeare's play in it and determined that they matched, like there are hundreds of matches between Shakespeare and a man by the name of Sir Thomas North. And Sir Thomas North translated a book called Plutarch's Lives, and along with some other books. So what they're saying is that Shakespeare did not write Shakespeare; he ripped off Sir Thomas North. And so my book is saying, the problem with that theory is that no plays of Sir Thomas North have ever been found. So when they're claiming that Shakespeare ripped off his plays, they think that he purchased them from Thomas North's son, and then Shakespeare's troupe of actors like recycled the lines and created Shakespeare's masterpieces from them. So
You-
this is the most recent theory on the authorship, because it's based in 2021.
Interesting, Mr. Robert. I'm looking at now your Amazon profile, but why it's not included your book right now?
Because it's like brand new. It's
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so it is. It's very new. It's probably just about uh, less than a week old. It's probably 4 days old or something.
Before we go in the deep conversation, I want to shout out to the people listening, of course, in the United States, in the state of California, because you are there, right, Mr. Robert?
Oh yeah.
In San Francisco, I got 82%, Los Angeles at 2%, Irvine, San Jose, Mountain View, Santa Ana, Moreno Valley, Sacramento, Southgate, Sunnyvale, Riverside, San Diego, Oakland, Downey, Fresno, Fontana, Burlingame, Thousand Oaks, Anaheim, Westminster, North Hollywood, Pleasantville, Glendale, South San Francisco, Oak Park, Reseda, Long Beach, Coarse Gold, Chula Vista, Camarillo, Sebastopol, Visalia, Newport Beach, Valencia, Colton, Walnut, Heights, Paco. I think it's all part in California. Oh my goodness, I have a lot of places in California. I have 100 places in. Sorry if I cannot read them all, but thank you so much, California, for listening to my podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Robert Dog. Mr. Robert, what will be the best highlight of the book that we're talking about?
Well, I think the best highlight might be just to realize the context and kind of setting this context of having um, allonyms, meaning that okay, we all or most of us remember that the first poem that made William Shakespeare famous was Venus and Adonis, and it was written in 1593. And we're told that William Shakespeare wrote this poem for Henry Roseley because he dedicated it to Henry Roseley. And he did this because he wanted to get a patronage from this wealthy earl. Henry Roseley was the richest man in all of England. So when I learned this in high school, I imagined Henry Roseley to look like Donald Trump, like a middle-aged guy with the bad comb over or something. And then found out, when I started reading more about Edward de Vere and why do people think that he was the author of Shakespeare, I learned that Edward de Vere's daughter, Elizabeth, was um, arranged to be married to Henry Roseley, the richest guy. And Henry Roseley was 16 years old, and Elizabeth Vere was 14 years old. So this was in 1589, before the writing of Venus and Adonis. Now, Henry Roseley rejected the marriage proposal, and her grandfather, his name was Lord Burleigh, was not a happy camper, and he fined Henry Roseley the sum of £5,000, which today would be maybe $1 million, let's say. And Henry Roseley said, "That's okay. I have the money. You can find me all you want, and I'm still not going to marry your granddaughter." Now, 2 years later, in 1591, a poem written in Latin called Narcissus came out. And this poem talked about the Greek god Narcissus, how he died of self-love because he saw his reflection in this pond. And it claimed that it's kind of like it compared Narcissus with Henry Roseley and said that Henry Roseley lacked honor and that he would never have any. He was not virile. He wouldn't have any have any children. And I think what happened is that the father of Elizabeth Vere, his name was Edward de Vere. I think he may have been Henry's godfather actually at the time, and he was mad about it, and he wrote Venus and Adonis because in the dedication to Venus and Adonis, it claimed that Henry Roseley had honor. It repeats the word honor like 7 times. So that word honor kind of jumped out at from the page at me. And then I realized that in high school, we never learned about Elizabeth Vere or really much about Henry Roseley, or I didn't realize that he was younger than me at the time. So it's kind of like interesting to find out this stuff. And then when you do, you realize, why would a guy, okay, so if you think like Los Angeles is 100 miles from San Diego, and London was 100 miles away from Stratford upon Avon, where William Shakespeare lived. So, how would someone who lived 100 miles away find this poem written in Latin in some kind? And by the way, the poem wasn't um, it it wasn't translated until the 1990s, and so it was kind of a difficult poem to translate in Latin. But so whoever wrote Venus and Adonis had to be very skilled at reading Latin. And Edward de Vere, the the person I believe wrote Shakespeare, studied law, and back then law was written in Latin. So you had Latin, you had to be an expert in Latin to be a lawyer back then. And then that's just kind of like one of the reasons why I think that Edward de Vere really was the author of Shakespeare. And so North by Shakespeare claims that what I'm saying is they got a lot of things right about, you know, throwing all these plays and information through this software, plagiarism, or plagiarism software. But I think they got the wrong person. And I think that it was an answer could be made that Edward de Vere had helped Thomas North translate some things from Latin when he was 18 years old, and then he wrote the plays and poems of William Shakespeare, and he attributed them to Shakespeare.
Oh, interesting, Mr. Robert. So, do you think your book is the same with the Da Vinci Code decoded? In the- do you think it's similarity? It so happened that your book is non-fiction, right?
It's nonfiction, so it's yeah. Somebody had suggested that I do something like that, where I make it some kind of more of a fictional person who's hot on the trail of this, and this is which is a great idea, and maybe I will do that. But in this one, I had to kind of like figure things out in my head, like where did Marlowe, for example, figure in this thing, and why, what. So I just like will ask myself little questions like that, and so I had to kind of sort it out, and this book is kind of a reflection of questions that I asked myself. It's called Where North by Shakespeare Goes South.
So, how
Yeah.
did you craft this book?
How did I craft it? Okay, well, I
Yes.
had written another book. It wasn't. I did write a book called Hang Shakespeare, but I had another book that I wrote that was like the real life mystery of William Shakespeare, that kind of thing. And I got a phone call from a person who read it, and he said, "Well, you need to read this book, this North by Shakespeare, because this is just written in 2021, and what you're saying is like prior to 2021. This is, like a big splash, and everybody's talking about it, and this must be the way that Shakespeare was written." And so I was going to send him an email like with the bullet points, like 5 bullet points of why I didn't think that was the case. And then what happened was my email got kind of long, and so I just saved it. And then I thought, I'm just going to write this out, and then it became like 10 pages, and then before I knew it, it was like 50 pages. And the book is only 135 pages, but people who have read it said that they liked it was kind of like what my fourth grade principal said, that she liked she liked my style of writing. But it's kind of funny.
This,
Yeah, so
if you describe your writing, what is it?
oh, what what people have told me uh, is you have a very engaging writing style. That's what they tell me, and um, because I try to put a little bit of humor. I wanted to make my teachers laugh when they read my paper, to make sure that they read it, and because when I was a kid, I would write a paper, but sometimes you weren't sure, did they really read this or not? So I would put in like little phrases like, Mr. McGrath runs naked through the football field or something, like that was the person who was reading it, just to see if it would catch it. And they never did, or they would just like one time a teacher said "ha," like, so I knew she read it. But sometimes
so,
I would do that just for the heck of it.
so I meant to say that your writing is something else. That when the teacher called you and went to the principal's office, there's something in your writing that people need to read.
The man's name was Thomas North. So
Thomas Not.
yeah, we're north by Shakespeare, goes south.
Oh, okay. So, Mr. Robert, let's talk about the main character.
Well, in this book, the main character is you. I mean, you're reading it. So, um, actually, Thomas North would be considered the main character, I suppose, because what I'm doing is taking apart some of the evidence that they have. For example, the book North by Shakespeare has 3 smoking guns that prove that Thomas North wrote the plays for Shakespeare. Now, like smoking gun number one is that Thomas North had a cousin who wrote a 13,000 page manuscript, or 13,000 word manuscript, and in it there were passages used in 11 of Shakespeare's plays. Now, he wrote this in 1575. Shakespeare was born in 1564. So, how would like a 9 or 10 or 11-year-old be able to read this manuscript? That's one of the smoking guns. The second one, there were 4 names that Thomas North he found. He went to France in 1575 or 1574. So he went to Paris with his brother and met 4 people in France, and those names can be found in the play Love's Labor is Lost by William Shakespeare. So how can someone explain that? Again, Shakespeare in 1575, if he was born in 1564, he was not going to be traveling to France. So that is smoking gun number 2. And then number 3 is just the events in Thomas North's life, how they match Shakespeare's life, or what the plays in Shakespeare. So so what I do in my book is I say, okay, let's look at smoking gun number 1. That's the one where Thomas North had a cousin who wrote this manuscript. Well, in 1578, Queen Elizabeth visited Roger North at this big house that he had in England, and he most likely would have presented that manuscript to Queen Elizabeth to read it. And she normally, because she only spent the night there, she probably would have said, let me take it with me and I'll read it. And the place that she stored her stuff to read was a place called Cecil House, which is where Edward de Vere lived. So it makes sense that Edward de Vere would have been able to read this really long manuscript and use it in 11 of Shakespeare's plays if he was Shakespeare, right? The
Yes.
the second one, the 4 names in Love's Labor's Lost. In 1574, Thomas North went to Paris with his brother. Remember that? Well, in January 1st, Edward de Vere is in Paris. And this is in January 1st. He probably had dinner with Thomas North and Roger North in Paris. They were all English, so most likely they it's not so they would have met the 4 people that people say only Thomas North would have known these 4 names to be put in Love's Labor's Lost. So that kind of puts a hole in that theory. The third one, the events in Thomas North's life matches the plays of plays of Shakespeare. Well, if you think about it, in 1575, Edward de Vere traveled to Italy, and he lived in a place called. He stayed in Venice where we know the Merchant of Venice was made. He went down to Sicily, Palermo, Messina, Padua. So if you were to take a map of Italy with those, colored push pins and mark the places of Shakespeare's 13 plays that are set in Italy, they would match the places that Edward de Vere stayed in. And that's something that you can't say with Thomas North or anyone else, really. William Shakespeare never left England. And yet people believe that he could write about Italy because maybe some friend told him about it, or that people come up with all these excuses. But they have the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So we know that Shakespeare went to Pisa because of one of the plays that there's a mention of the people of Pisa. He calls them the grave people of Pisa, or the grave citizens of Pisa. Sorry. Somebody in 1982 went to Pisa. They tried to recreate where Shakespeare must have been, and they realized that they were standing in a cemetery, an old cemetery. So when they said the grave citizens, it's a pun. He's talking about the people of the cemetery. So somebody would have had to have gone there. And how, if William Shakespeare never left England, it doesn't add up.
Oh, very well said, Mr. Robert. But before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, on our third season with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef in one of the best restaurant in downtown Toronto. And we are so very grateful because we got our 1 million downloads. If you're supporting my Food 101, can you please support my Book 101 review? Because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world to write more books, people, so that we can read lots of books. So, Mr. Robert, are you independent or traditional publishing?
I'm an indie author.
So, what are the pros and cons of being in the author?
Well, when you're writing about Shakespeare, people have, especially they have really strong beliefs. So it's a very divisive topic. And if you were to go to a traditional publisher, most people would just tell you that, you know, um, these people want proof. We want to see the evidence that you have that William Shakespeare did not write Shakespeare plays, poems, and sonnets. So, but that's kind of like nowadays people want, you know, we want to take a purple pill and lose weight. We don't want to watch our diet and exercise. We want to eat greasy cheeseburgers and fries and eat ice cream and take a pill and lose weight. I mean, we want easy ways. And so to explain why Shakespeare didn't write Shakespeare takes an understanding of the context. You understand how the people, the noblemen of that time didn't argue publicly because they felt that was wrong. So they would have these other people do that or sign their names to it.
I think in the future you will be aiming for traditional.
I don't know. That remains to be seen. I have been approached a couple of times, but I've held out. I mean, it's everybody's. It's a little bit of a control thing because everybody's got their ideas. So sometimes when it's like a Hollywood kind of thing. Well, where I live, I'm 15 minutes from Hollywood, really, with no traffic, of course. That's so yeah, and I've been to a couple of meetings where people have approached me about writing for something, and but they have what they want, and so they're very people. It's a control thing a little bit.
What are your inspiring message for those aspiring writers out there?
I would say write the truth. I mean, try to figure things out, and that's what I'm ultimately searching for an answer these days is, does the truth matter? I mean, we've been living in the world of Donald Trump where, lies and misrepresentations have been considered okay and we just lived with it. But I think the truth does matter, especially if it's coming from the White House or institutions. I mean, in the past, we had our parents and priests or religious people who provided kind of like guardrails for us, like not to do or do things, but we've kind of like gotten away where it's kind of a wild, crazy world, and they have all these divisive people on the right and angry people on the left, and so the world is becoming kind of this mad shouting match, and where each one wants to win and nobody really cares about the truth. And I think that we have to get to the bottom of these things, like who and what and why we believe this happened here, and that will make the plays of Shakespeare more interesting when you know the truth, because then it can relate with other things that were happening at the time, and you'd say, oh, okay, I get that now.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Robert. And before we go on, please do grab a copy of my poetry book titled Abstract Poetry. I do it volume by volume. Volume 1 is Emotions, Volume 2 is Famous People, Volume 3 is Universe, and Volume 4 is Love. Please do grab a copy and support my poetry books. So, Mr. Robert, can you please invite our listeners to buy all your books?
You can stop by my website. It's Robert Boog, spelled B like boy, OOG.com. And you can, what I did is I tried to bundle them a couple, like 2 books together. Like Shakey's Madness, I I bundled with this book along with where you could buy 3 books on Shakespeare that I've written that I thought would go together as a bundle and save some money at the same time. But
Yes.
I'm writing. Obviously, I make more money selling one house than books, so I'm really trying to get the truth of the matter out, because I think it's important for students to question these things. Growing up, I was never told to question. I was just I accepted that Shakespeare wrote this stuff, and then I went to England actually, and when I went there, I was thinking, wow, in my mind, I imagined something totally different. It would be like somebody coming to California and going to Disneyland, but actually taken to like a miniature golf course in the San Fernando Valley. And there's, where there's a tiny little castle and you're given a golf club to swing, and you're thinking, this looks so much different in my head. But if you go to the real uh, Disneyland, you would see the big castle and people walking around, and and it would match your imagination.
Yes, indeed, people. Let's support Mr. Robert Boog because the book is, I can say, phenomenal. Decoding's author identity is something else. So, Mr. Robert, what do you think your next project you want to decode? Can you do the Bronte sisters? I love that.
I I don't know at this point. I'm just relaxing right now actually. So mhm.
Oh, okay. And good luck for all your books. I hope people will buy it and support you so that more books to come.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much, Mr. Robert. Moricon people, see you soon.